with a prayer from Imam Khalil Akbar.
As Muslim, we always begin by saying Assalamu alaikum, which means a peace be unto you, and may the peace that only God can give you be yours. Um, I'm going to recite the opening of the Quran, a chapter there that's called the opening, and it is always used in our prayer. When people ask me, they say, well, "What is your prayer book?" We tell them the Quran is our prayer book, from the very first chapter to the last. So I'm going to recite it in Arabic, since we're talking about diversity and tradition. We're going to recite it, and then we're going to translate. Please join me. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Amen. With the name of God, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. Praise be to Almighty God, the cherisher and sustainer of all systems of knowledge, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer, sole judge on the day of religion. We worship you only, and to you only do we turn for help. Guide us on the straight path, the path of those you have favored, not the path of those who have earned your displeasure, nor of those who go astray. O God, bless the food that you have provided us and save us from the punishment of the fire. With the name of God, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. Amen.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. So I'm going to do some icebreakers with you all. I'm so grateful that everybody's here today. How y'all doing? Was that honest? That was honest? All right, so at this moment, I want you to think about everything you have to do today. Everything. Just take a minute. Y'all ready? All right, I'm going to open up with this poem. Well, first and foremost, with Allah's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. A new day. Birds chirping. The sun beginning to rise. All praise be to God as I open my eyes. A new day. Morning, silence, peace, serenity. Gather your thoughts. Get on your grind. Everything is coming together with God's timing in mind. Breathe. Everything will not get accomplished your way. Smile. Success doesn't mean everything will happen today. Strive. All praise be to God, a beautiful feeling to be alive. So everybody in this room is here and present with me. We're all alive. That's a blessing. So going back to what I told you just a moment ago, think about everything you have to do. And before we got started, I heard somebody at another table, oh my goodness, I have this to do, I have that to do, I have so much to do. And so thank you for that. All right, so this is an interactive game, so to speak. As Muslims, we have 5 obligatory prayers throughout the day. So we only had one so far, the morning prayer. So when it's time for prayer, or when I say it's time for prayer throughout this exercise, I just want y'all to breathe with me. You're going to breathe in as one, and we're going to breathe out slowly. That's your pause. That's your break. That's your peace. That's your meditation. That's your moment. Y'all ready? All right. So it's early in the morning. We hear the birds chirping, so you know it's time for prayer. You're getting your things together. You already taken your shower. You've gotten dressed. You're preparing your breakfast, but you're getting ready to pray. So on the count of three, we're going to breathe together. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe out. How did that feel? Calming. Y'all can shout out. Refreshing. What else? Relaxing. Soothing. Centering. You had your moment with your creator. It was just you and your creator. It wasn't all this extra noise going on in your world. You weren't thinking about everything you had to do. And if you were letting God know, can you please help me with this? All right. So we have 5 obligatory opportunities to do that. Now the next thing we're going to do, I'm going to make a note. We are not melanated and excused. And irregardless of your complexion, your hue, your ethnic background, just example for African Americans, we are not melanated and excused when it comes to mental health, emotional health, psychological well-being. It's like, oh, we're black. No, we're human first. As a Muslim, we are not Muslim and above the human concern for challenges in regards to our wellness. Like, oh, you should pray, you need to do this. Yes, pray, but that doesn't excuse your mental, emotional well-being. If you need something extra, you get that something extra, regardless if it's counseling, whether it's talking to your family, getting the help that you need for your particular obstacle, challenge, what have you. That doesn't mean that you have a lesser relationship with your Lord because of you needing something additional. All right? So in regards to the spiritual and the mental. Cultural, I'll give some examples. So I'm on campus. It's my junior year. And you know how you know somebody, but you don't really know them on a personal level, but you know them just by, they're on the social media, you know of them. So I see this young man, he's always dressed to the T, he's always smiling, he's a social butterfly, he's involved in this, he's involved in that. And I'm just like, you know what, you're striving and thriving, that's beautiful. I don't know his inner conversations, I don't know his inner conflicts, I don't know his inner challenges, his family dynamic, I don't know your world. But what I know is that you're striving and thriving from what I know. So I had no idea that he was challenged with depression. I had no idea that he potentially tried to commit suicide. I had no idea of any of his challenges. But again, from his expression on the outside, he's striving and thriving. So at the time, he was an event promoter. So he shifted gears in terms of the work that he's doing. So he's doing like mental health. I believe he started a nonprofit. He's doing well. He published his book in regards to his story. So I'm proud of him. And I see him again on social media. So I'm going to ask us, when I ask you how you're doing, I want you to look to your neighbor, whether you know them or not, and tell them how you're doing. And then I'm going to move further with this activity. You got 1 minute. All right, your minute is about up. We are going to get settled. Tune back in. All right, so what I heard, it was really friendly. Smiles were on your faces. All of this. And I'm going to give another example. So on social media, there's filters on the pictures. You can take a really good picture naturally with the natural lighting and all of that, but then you also have the option for whatever you away from how you naturally look, all of these different gestures. So when I asked you to say how you were doing, there could have been some filters on your expression because we want to protect our status quo at sometimes. So we're gonna do this one more time, and I'll give you another example. I met my peers on campus, and I want to say it was my senior year, which is a blessing. So senior year, I'm in the cafeteria. I have a number of things that are due and coming up, and he's like, "Hey, how you doing?" It's just friendly. That filtered answer, that status quo answer. And then I saw him again after he's eat, and I said, "Wait a minute, I have something else to say." And I told him what was really going on, how I was really feeling, and he just did that little breath like, "I'm stressed too." He was so honest. So you have 30 seconds to say, you don't have to give all your business, but 30 seconds just to really share how you're doing, and then we're going to transition to some food. I'm gonna close out. All right, and we're back. So after I close out, I thank you all for participating with me. All right, everybody, we're back. We're back. They got a lot to say about how you're doing. All right, so after I close out with this poem, we're going to transition to some food. We have a beautiful stash on this back table, and thank everybody who's participated in getting this event orchestrated. So we are going to start over here, and this is after I close out with my poem. So these 4 tables, you all can get ready, stand up, and then after, as you all are transitioning back to your seats, these next 3 tables, and so on and so forth. All right? So I'm going to close out with this poem called Contagious. A smile is a form of charity, and I try to give this away all the time. I have no knowledge of your struggle. I have no knowledge of what's on your mind. But making a small gesture to smile is contagious. And you hope it rubs off on other people's faces. Contagious, more so than the common cold or the flu, or the nasty disparities and injustices we see all over the news. I hope that your presence, your influence, your existence is felt. An inspirational pick-me-up or a cup of coffee for anybody that needs help. Little do you know it, a small gesture, no big deal. But when you're having a good or bad day and someone smiles your way, that's real. So as we continue to go through life, this beautiful struggle, through many stages, I hope that your smile, your strength, your contribution is nothing less than contagious. Thank you. All right, so I got a tip. So reserved tables go first. If you're sitting at a table that says reserved, you all can head over to the food section and get your food. Bring your plates with you.
Turn it off. Testing, testing.
All right, so they're ready for some more people. So we're going to add some people to the line. If you were not on the reserve tables, but you're over this side, I need this table, and this table. You all can head over to the food.
Good morning. If you've been through the line and it tastes so great, just line up again.
Y'all hear this?
Hello. You can continue eating. Hello. I had the pleasure of introducing Imam Khalil Akbar. He is a resident imam from the mosque in the city of Charlotte. He has served in the capacity since 1988. Having embraced his teachings and honorable mention under Elijah Muhammad since 1968, he accepted a new direction initiated by Imam W.D. Muhammad in 1975. He has diligently served as the main role of Imam since 1977, including 10 years as the resident Imam of the Harrisburg Mosque in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Mr. Akbar is sought after by civic and community groups to hold dialogues on Islam. He has addressed numerous audiences in mosques, churches, and synagogues. And he is also on the board of directors for Mecklenburg Ministers for the last 6 years. For 6 years. Not anymore. And is currently a member of the organization of the Clergy Board. Mr. Akbar received a Master's in Human Services degree from Lincoln University and a certified clinical pastor training at the State of Correctional in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania. We welcome Mr. Imam Akbar.
Very much. Again, we always begin by recognizing that there's a power bigger than us, more important than us, and more significant than us. So we always begin thanking God for opportunity to speak to you all and for you all being here this morning. I assume that this is the first time for many of you to visit a mosque, and she mentioned mosque, and on the introduction it would say Masjid. Masjid happened to be a place of prostration. Mosque is synonymous. Mosque is French. Masjid is Arabic. So it's both. It's the same. So you are not familiar with our religious and some of our religious and traditional practices. For example, you were asked to remove your shoes before entering what we call the Masala, a prayer area, almost like a sanctuary. There are religious and hygienic reasons for this, because the mosque is the house of God Almighty. We Muslims come as one unified body to prostrate to Him alone. Not only the shoe must be taken off to prevent dirt from outside to enter the mosque, but also cleanliness of the body, breath, and clothes are also mandatory. So we ask everyone who enters this prayer area to be modest in their dress and behavior. This is not the only mosque in Charlotte. We have mosques in this city that are predominantly Arab, Pakistani, Bosnia, African, and of course the indigenous African American. And some of the practices among us are universal. In other words, we believe in God, and we believe that Muhammad is a messenger. We believe in praying 5 times a day. We believe in charity. These are pillars of Islam. We believe in fasting during the holy month of Ramadan, and we believe in making pilgrimage to Mecca. But there are other practices which have to do with culture and tradition that may vary from mosque to mosque. Now, I have 7 to 10 minutes, and I hope I don't get preachy. Imams are like pastors, and sometimes we can't get preachy. So that means I'm going to have to condense some of this stuff. Did you see her? She gave me 7 to 10 minutes. I'm going to try my best to condense some of this. There are many mental health challenges faced by people in our pluralistic society. And these challenges are by no means monolithic. While many of the problems are common to every group in our diverse society, the causal factors may not be the same. There are religious and cultural norms that play an important role in the mental health of various populations in our society. As an American, I know that there's a stigma associated with mental health problems. After all, who wants to be diagnosed as being different? And although mental illnesses do not discriminate, as a people, we must examine the historical roots of mental challenges among us. What are the causal factors of this problem among us? Having been a clinical chaplain in the Division of Prison for 25 years, I have firsthand knowledge of the great disproportionate representation of African Americans in the prison industrial complex. The question that needs to be answered is why. Michelle Alexander described the prison situation in her new book. It's not a new book, but I read her book, The New Jim Crow, as mass incarceration in the age of colorblindness. She points out that the movement from slavery, Jim Crow, to mass incarceration is the same movement that existed in the times of chattel slavery, but under different names. And as time progressed, use of code language, such as war on drugs, getting tough on crime, welfare reform, was used to hide the targeted population that were Black Americans. After the Emancipation Proclamation, a scheme was implemented to maintain the economy of the South that was driven by the slave economy, to make laws that made it easy to incarcerate African Americans in order to maintain a cheap or free labor force that bolstered the economy in the South. As a youngster growing up in rural Georgia, Washington County, I heard of African Americans being sent to prison for stealing a loaf of bread to feed their families. And they would be given more time to serve than an African American who actually killed another African American would get, particularly if the perpetrator was a good worker. Today, this is not just a Southern problem. It is a national epidemic. In federal and state facilities throughout the country, high numbers of African Americans and Mexicans are housed. In my opinion, this is just one of the problems among us that can be discussed from a mental health perspective. I don't think it's impossible to give an accurate, honest assessment of our issues without considering the role that chattel slavery played in our past and current issues. One of our imams during our lecture referred to the issues that we have to deal with, such as disunity, the condition of family life, in which only about 38% of our homes have two parents living in the same household. He referred on black crime. He referred to this as PTSD, but he used it as an acronym for post-traumatic slave disorder to show a connection between many of the mental health issues in our community and the traumatic impact of slavery, which is denied by some mental health experts, but believed by others to have been passed down generation to generation and still affects our community today. Now, what role does religion play? Religion plays a very important role in our lives that contribute to our mental, emotional, and spiritual states. Many times, instead of encouraging the people suffering from mental problems to seek professional help from trained practitioners, the minister would sometimes encourage the individual to pray and hope for a miracle. Today, we must be astute enough to know that the role that science plays in treatment. Prayer is a given, but science is also a gift from God. So I think that we as religious leaders must understand something about human nature and know that sometimes we need to make referrals if we are not trained to deliver the help that the individual needs. Many religious leaders have CPE. I don't know if you heard of CPE, clinical pastoral education, or training that helps them understand themselves and the problems of others as well. But this training should also make them aware of their limitation and when it is time to make referrals. Mental health issues are not something that are easy to discuss because of the stigma associated with them. There are those who feel safer talking to religious leaders than to any person. In prison, the chaplains have more people to see on their daily appointment roster than the staff psychologists. You wonder why? Since obviously the prison system has many people who need help for mental health issues. The answer is this: inmates do not want to be seen, quote unquote, as crazy. The stigma is just too risky for them to deal with, and therefore they choose to be in denial that they need help from the staff psychologists. What impact does racism have on the mental health of Americans? I shouldn't just say African Americans. One writer observed the trauma of, quote, the trauma of slavery critically shaped our subjectivity, yet this impact is rarely acknowledged. In fact, the subjugation, cruelties, and deprivations of slavery have given a traumatic cast to African American subjectivity through the intergenerational transmission of trauma this wounding has endured. I'm going to skip some of this because I know I'm about to run over time. In the Quran, God says, "O people, we created you from one man and one woman and made you nations and tribes that you may know one another, not hate one another. Verily the most honored among you is those who are most obedient to God." And in another verse, it says, "And one of his signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the diversity of your tongues and colors. Most surely these are signs for those who think." America is the most diverse society in the world, and from its very beginning, she was meant to be. In New York Harbor, there's a statue of a woman with an inscription that reads, "Give me your tired and your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shores. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." And we know that many immigrants from Europe made their way to these shores, and they seemed to breathe a freer atmosphere. And they organized and became powerful in America. But some of us were not the wretched refuse of the teeming shores. We happened to be caught between the desire of some of the colonists to have free labors and the desire of some of our own people to merchandise us. I am Muslim and African American. As a Muslim, I feel the hurt of millions of Muslims in this country and abroad who have nothing to do with terrorism, but who are stereotyped as being complicit to the horrible crimes against America and the world. As an African American, I feel the historical hurt of my people. After 300 years, we are still having to address racial problems. Muslim Americans who are rooted in in various countries on this earth, from the Middle East, Far East, Africa, Asia, Eastern Europe, and other places, who now have second and third generation born in America, obviously are suffering from the steady beat of the media that presents to an unknowing public a stereotypical image of Muslims in general. So you're left to wonder, what is the status of mental health in their communities? Until 9/11, many of them did not think that the world of discrimination and racism was a big problem for them. They were programmed to think that this was just a complaint from angry, lazy people. But 9/11 proved to be the event that opened their eyes to the viciousness of racism and class discrimination. One of our brothers from overseas said to an imam from our association, he said, "Now we are all treated the same way." So we are happy to have you all here this morning for this discussion. And I want to thank Joan and her organization, Living Waters, and the Honorable Carla Carnahan for their leadership and for boldly choosing our humble place to hold this gathering. And I certainly hope you all feel welcome. I hope you feel very comfortable. Our sisters have prepared a wonderful meal. If you want to, I think we have enough for you to take with you. So we appreciate them. They always step to come forth and help us out when we need help the most. And we thank them for that. Brothers also worked to try to help organize this. They did the heavy lifting. They did I call it the grunt work. So we thank you, and I appreciate the few minutes that you've given me to say a few things. Thank you. Cut my talk, but that's okay.
Thank you for that enlightening information. Now we will have a mother's story by Mrs. Carla Carlisle, who has written a new book called The Journey of the Sun, which is an emotional, riveting memoir about a woman's 8-year battle with the system for the child of her heart, who suffered from the prolonged trauma caused by his birth mother, a victim herself in perpetual physical, emotional, and mental abuse. Ms. Carla is a child and mental health advocate who is leading a movement to educate community and faith-based leaders, public officials, and child and family service providers about trauma and the impact it has on abused children, to provide safe and healthy environments to keep them alive, safe, stable, and resilient. So now we will have Miss Carla Carlisle come speak and tell a mother's story.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to change this up a little bit. Hopefully Joan doesn't get mad at me for doing so. She won't get mad? Okay. So my name is Carla Carlisle, as mentioned. I'd like to start off by just reading one brief chapter from my book, and it's called The Attack. And I'm going to make it G-rated, I promise. It says, turn this car around. That's Montoya, her voice shaking through the interior of my car with venom. Montoya, her voice dripping with an almost disgusted impatience. She was mad about something, probably money, and Devin was in the back seat, silent, watchful. I see us in the car, our mouths working, eyebrows furrowed in anger, but about what I don't know. I'm experiencing this scene in bursts, like static from a TV with a loose antenna. I can see the picture, but the resolution is off. I can only intuit that something is different, and I'm powerless to change the channel. I see Montoya raise her hand quicker than I've ever seen her move, and feel the force of her backhand smashing my lips against my teeth before I've even registered what she's done. Though I'm driving, I see us look at each other in horror and surprise, our expressions reflections of one another. Oh my God, you hit me. Oh my God, I hit you. We're locked in the truth of our relationship now with the eyes of my soul. I see us both acknowledge that change is on the horizon. We cannot continue on from here. I cannot be the abused. I can no longer be the enabler. Miss Carla, I'm sorry, she says to me from what feels like a distance. Her features warped by tears I cannot stop, seem contrite. I know we have some place to be, but a feeling hot and prickly up and down the surface of my skin urges me to pull over. I'm too stunned to drive any further. I still haven't spoken as I'm not quite sure what to say. I don't know whether to fight or flee, but I strongly know that I need to leave the car. The car isn't safe. I'm not safe. I'm not safe. It's the first time I really let the thought sink into my brain. Every day that I'm with these people, I'm putting myself and my child in danger. I'm not safe. I can't help the tears that find their way down my cheeks, the anger, humiliation, and fear associated with being slapped like a child in front of my son digs into my soul with heat and shame. No wonder he didn't respect me. Through my passivity, I taught him that love and compassion were weaknesses easily slapped down by the person who had the loudest voice. He didn't see nothing, Miss Carla, Montoya insisted as I unsnapped my seatbelt, fumbling with the door handle. Needing to get out of the car, he don't know, she repeated, chirping like a bird at dawn. I could hear the fear in her voice. A woman that had lived to push boundaries and bully others to get her way understood that she'd overstepped. With each passing minute, her hold on me was slipping, and though I was sure it wasn't her intention, that slap woke me up. I stepped out of the car, the driver's side door shut firmly behind me, and I dropped to my knees. I didn't know what else to do. I had done everything, had tried everything, and I was lost. Please, I prayed silently, tears running down my bruised cheeks and swollen lip. Lord, please. And there, in a parking lot of a store I can't remember, I gave up. And so that's the midway through our story, but a real turning point. So let me reintroduce myself. My name is Carla Carlisle, and while I can name you many accomplishments, one thing I was not able to accomplish for many, many years was being a mother. I was living in Washington, D.C. I was married. I was quote-unquote very successful. I worked for the FBI. I worked on Capitol Hill. I had this, on the surface, awesome marriage to a husband who worked with emotionally disturbed children. And we had fertility challenges. We tried for a number of years to get pregnant and were unable to do so. Once we did conceive, I had a miscarriage. If you've ever been through that as a husband or as a wife or just as a friend or family member, you know it's devastating. Our marriage didn't survive because of that and many other reasons. At some point we moved to Charlotte, and one of my friends suggested that I look into becoming a foster parent. And I always felt that being a mother was much more important than giving birth. I knew there was a risk in becoming a foster parent because the child more than likely will go back. So I was very honest with my social worker, and I said, I really want a child who is at risk at the level where the chances are pretty good that they won't go back. So I ended up with, which was a big surprise to me, a premature baby boy who was 2 months premature, 10 days old, and he was the 11th child of this birth mother. She had lost her parental rights to the other 10. And at the time, honestly, I had no experience in the foster care system. I really thought I had experience working with people in need, but I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I had this little baby, this precious little boy with the most amazing brown eyes who stole my heart from day one for 6 months. And I fell in love. And at 6 months, the judge said he should go home to his mother. Although she had her rights taken to 10 other children, and I had gotten to know her and the father at this point, and I was sure he was not going to be safe. This was the beginning of me starting to learn about generational trauma, and I learned more about her life and the life of the father, and while I want to respect their privacy, what I will say is, and I'm not going to do this quote justice, but I will say there's something Martin Luther King said about it's an insult to ask a man to pull himself up by his bootstraps if he has no boots. And what I will say is this couple had no boots. They had no foundation. They both individually learned how to survive. Not live, not thrive, but survive. When you have to protect yourself from those who are supposed to protect you, there are a lot of fundamental things in life you don't learn. And I was sure that that was going to be the life of my son. So I decided, against the advice of DSS, to give up my foster license and try to co-parent with these parents. And it wasn't like I'm giving you the short story. It wasn't that short. I went about a week or two, and I just couldn't sleep at night because I just was so concerned about my son. Because as far as I was concerned, he was my baby. I had him. He slept on my chest at night. He was my child. And they were willing to share him with me. So for 6 tumultuous years, we tried to co-parent. And it got really, really bad. They were living in motels. They were living in houses that had, one house had so many mice in it that a snake showed up. There was what ended up being drug abuse, but I didn't necessarily know the signs. I learned a lot, and I grew up a lot. I mean, I felt pretty grown, but I grew up in a different way. And I saw my son as he began to get older, demonstrating signs of anger and aggression. This sweet little boy became very, very angry and aggressive, and especially toward women and especially toward me. And he was beginning to be pushed in a position of making a choice. Do you love Miss Carla or do you love us? Miss Carla's providing for us. By this point, I had put them in a house. Not because, I'm trying to buy them, but because I wanted him to be safe. And in turn, his mom needed to be safe and needed to make sure there was food on the table. So to make a long story short, my son was put in a no-win position. He had one foot in my life and in my world, and he had one foot in their life and in their world, where people were fighting and trying to kill each other. I didn't know a lot that was going on, but I knew enough. So I told you about when she hit me. This was at the end of 2015. In 2016, my son was 6 years old, and he attempted suicide twice at 6. And through my interaction with Mental Health America, who's sitting in the back, and NAMI, and I've learned about statistics about young people from age 10 to 34. It's the second leading cause of death, suicide. And that's so sad to me. And so I just knew I couldn't let things continue the way they were. So the story gets better. And the bottom line is this: I had to take matters into my own hands. I remembered working with an estate planning attorney. She had given me the numbers to some attorneys, and I found those phone numbers, and the third attorney I called said, "You absolutely have a case." By this point, my son was in behavioral health. They took excellent care of him. His parents were trying to get him out of behavioral health. I had to act fast. In 3 days, I had emergency custody, and I had protection orders, and 2 years later, the adoption was finalized. My son was 6 at the time. He's 9 now. He's doing amazingly well. He plays football. He's a rising 4th grader. He's just awesome. He's doing great. We've added 2 young men to our family. They are members of the Males Place. Reggie Singleton is here. I've been trying to pour in as much positive as I can into them, and where I can't, I have a lot of men who stand in the gap to help us, just so that they will be positive members of society. And I've had a lot of support from medical professionals, from therapists. My son also went through trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. And if you don't know about it, it's something really, I'm not saying it's the right therapy for everyone, but it helps him process his trauma. He has post-traumatic stress disorder in a way that worked for someone that young. And it helped me learn how to go through it with him. And we continue to work through it. Every day is a step forward, and then we have days that are go back. But for the most part, if you met him today, you would think, wow, he's a huge 9-year-old, but he's amazing. I mean, he's ahead of the curve in academically, but he just learned how to tie his shoes last year. So trauma impacts the whole body, mind, body, and soul, and spirit. But he's doing amazingly well. He's just one. There are so many more, and that's why I'm glad we're all here today. I just want to tell you how thankful I am to be a mother to three, sorry, I lost count, to 3 wonderful young black men. And I feel so blessed to be in this position to share our story with you. Thank you for your time. I apologize if I went over. I just feel blessed to be here. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carla. Now we will have our keynote speaker, Mr. Victor Armstrong, who serves as Vice President of the Behavioral Health and with Atrium Health in Charlotte, North Carolina. I couldn't read a long bio for you. He is responsible for the operational and strategic oversight of the Atrium's largest behavioral health campus of the Behavioral Health Charlotte, which contains 66 beds, inpatient beds, psychiatric emergency department, and 10 provided based outpatient behavioral health programs. He is the award recipient and recognized as the 2019 Atrium Health Excellence and Diversity and Inclusion Award. He is 2018 Distinguished Alumni Award from East Carolina University School of Social Work, and also the Pride Magazine 2018 Best of the Best and I2I Center of Integrative Health in 2018. Well, that award innovated was whole person care. So now we will have Mr. Victor Armstrong, who is magna cum laude from North Carolina Central University and has a master's in social work from East Carolina University. So welcome.
So, lapel mic. Okay, I think it's on. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here today. It is this is gonna work. All right. Okay, we'll go with this one. So thank y'all so much for having me here today. It is an honor, pleasure for me to be here. I want to thank my friends, Joan Ben and Lawrence Barker Bay of Living Waters. I want to thank my friend, Representative Carla Cunningham, for allowing me to be a part of this program today. And I also want to thank our host, Imam Khalil Akbar, and all the friends and family here. One of the things that the Imam said in his remarks was that there is one who is greater than us, one who's more powerful than us. And I'm thankful this morning that you can call him a lot of different things. You can call him God, you can call him Lord, you can call him Allah. But I'm thankful that the one who has the final say in everything that concerns us ain't named Donald Trump. So I think it's fitting. First of all, having this conversation today, and I think it's also fitting that we're having it here in this place. I was born, raised in Eastern North Carolina, son of a pastor. My father pastored 48 years. He just retired about a year and a half ago from pastoring. So I was raised in the church. I was raised around faith-based people. And I'm reminded some years ago, I was in college at North Carolina Central University. And on my 21st birthday, I had a girlfriend who decided that she was going to throw me a birthday party. And so we were on Christmas break. My birthday is early January. And we're down in Plymouth, North Carolina. And I know my brother back here knows Plymouth, North Carolina. That's my homeboy right there. And so we're having this birthday party. And it just so happened that just before the Christmas break, I had fractured my ankle. So I'm on crutches. But I'm at my birthday party. I'm on crutches, and but I'm doing all I can do. I can't dance but one way because I'm on crutches. But I'm doing all I can do, just rocking, doing what I could do. But it turns out these guys decided that they were party. They were going to come into the party and they were going to start flicking the lights on and off and pushing people around and turning stuff over. They were going to take over my birthday party. Now I'm there, brothers. One of my brothers was there with me. I'm on crutches. There's about 6 of these guys. And I'm thinking now, if I had my other brother with me and 2 good legs, I figure 3 of us can be a match for any 6 men. We can handle them. But it happens that I am broken because I've got a broken ankle. My other brother ain't really built for speed, so he can't run. So I'm going to have to f the music somehow. So 2 things I knew. One thing I knew was that I didn't know what I was doing. The other thing I knew was I wasn't going to let them know that I didn't know what I was going to do. So I would take that crutch and I'd hold it up and I'd say, you cross this line, I'm going to hit you upside the head with this crutch. They cross that line, I'll draw another one. If you cross this line, I'm going to hit you in the head with this crutch. And in my mind, I'm thinking, if my other brother was here, he's older. He's known to be a fighter, got fast hands. I know if he was here, we could handle this. And just about the time that I was about to throw the crutch down, just about the time that I was about to give up and give in, I heard a familiar voice in back of me say, don't put your hands on my brother. I threw the crutch on the ground and said, now what y'all want to do? My other brother has shown. One thing that I know is that when we are in crisis, we want to know that somebody familiar that we sit with has got our back. When we are in crisis, we want to know that somebody bigger, stronger, more experienced than us will step in and have our back. And for people of color, and in particular, black people, for centuries, that has been the church. That has been the faith-based community. We are in crisis today. There's a mental health crisis that is impacting black people. And so I think it's fitting that when we look around and don't know where to turn, up steps the house of faith and says, I got your back. About 1 in 5 Americans, 1 in 5 struggle with a mental illness in any given year. That's regardless of race. But of the folks that live with mental illness, less than half of all Americans with a mental disorder get treatment. And the percentage of black people is half of that. So for some reason, We're not immune from mental illness, but we fail to get treatment. Why? Well, the Imam relates some of that. Historical adversity is one piece of it. Historical adversity, which includes slavery, sharecropping, race-based exclusion from health, educational, social, and economic resources, translates into socioeconomic disparities. And when you have socioeconomic disparities, you don't have access to a lot of what other folks have access to. I don't know if you know this, but if you go into a lot of the socioeconomically deprived communities, you're not going to find CMC Maine sitting in the middle of them. You're not going to find Novant Health sitting in the middle of them. So we don't have access to a lot of the resources that some other folks may have access to. Socioeconomic status is linked to mental health. Why? Because people who are impoverished, homeless, incarcerated, or have substance abuse problems are going to be at higher risk for poor mental health because they have more stressors to deal with. Now, part of the challenge for us as black people is that we have to understand, first of all, that we're not immune to mental health issues, but second of all, that there's no shame in having a mental health issue. One of the challenges that we do have, though, is that there's a lack of diagnostic and treatment studies, particularly on depression, on African Americans. So as African Americans, we are underserved, understudied, and misdiagnosed. So most of the research, most of the mental health research is based on European models. Most of the therapy is based on models that don't take into account what we have dealt with. So subsequently, a lot of African American men who are dealing with sometimes PTSD, as we heard earlier, get diagnosed with schizophrenia because folks don't understand. Let me tell you something. And I have been a clinician, I have been a therapist, and it is very easy when a black man comes in, and I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to talk about what I know. I know about what it is to be a black man. When a black man comes in, expressing anger about situations and circumstances, expressing anger about the cards that he's been dealt in life, it is very easy to document that as anger issues. He's got some anger issues. We need to have these anger issues, but if you take it in the context of the experience of an African American man living in America, it ain't anger issues. It's just explaining life in America through the lens of a black man. So part of our challenge is that we don't have people who understand sometimes our story and our challenges that we talk to. Believe it or not, only about 2% of psychiatrists in America are black. 2% of psychologists, 4% of social workers. Now you tell me what black man wants to go and sit on the couch of a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white woman and tell her, I don't feel like getting out of bed in the morning, I cry all the time, and my sex drive is low. Not going to happen. So it's no wonder that we struggle not only with initiating treatment, but as African Americans, we are not only less likely to initiate treatment, but we are more likely to terminate treatment prematurely. For us is that because we're not outside of an ongoing clinical setting, an ongoing therapeutic relationship, a lot of times when we enter the system through emergency departments. We enter the system in crisis. And when you enter the system, the mental health system, through an acute care emergency department, that is not going to be the most conducive environment to getting the kind of help and connecting to the resources that you need. To put the numbers in more context, if we look at suicide, around the world somebody dies by suicide every 40 seconds. So think about that. Around the world, someone is dying by suicide every 40 seconds. In America, we lose somebody to suicide about 129 times a day. 129 people per day in this country die by suicide. In North Carolina, we lose one about every 6 hours. And we lose twice as many people to suicide every year in this country as we do to homicide. Now, you wouldn't believe it because homicides draw headlines, suicides do not. But we lose twice as many people to suicide as we do to homicide. In fact, we have more law enforcement officers who die by suicide every year than in the line of duty. We also have lost more Vietnam veterans to suicide since the war than we lost soldiers in the war. So suicide is real, suicide is happening. Well, why does that matter to us? Well, let me tell you this to frame it. Because we have in our minds a narrative of who we are. And part of the narrative is that suicide doesn't impact black people. You know, I mentioned that I was recently from Eastern North Carolina. So for a while I worked at East Carolina University. And so one evening after work, I went to the mall, and I was walking around the mall and went to the men's room. So in the men's room, washing my hands, and all of a sudden, this lady comes busting into the men's room. She looks shocked when she sees me standing there. She says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I thought this was the ladies' room." I said, "No, ma'am, this is the men's room. I'm sorry, you're in the wrong place." And so, embarrassed, she turned around and walked out. Well, probably not 20 seconds later, another woman busts into the men's room. And again, she looks shocked and says, "Well, I thought this was the men's." I said, "No, ma'am, this is the men's room." Now, by this time, I'm wondering what's wrong with these folks. Now, don't get me wrong. I know I'm a good-looking guy, but I don't have women breaking down bathroom doors to me. So something is wrong. So as this woman walks out, and I look around this men's room, I notice there are no urinals in this men's room. So as it turns out, I am in his room. Now, I'll tell you that. Lawrence said it happened to him. You didn't have to tell that. Now, but I tell you this. One of the lessons I learned from that experience is that even when I know that I'm right, there's a possibility I just might be wrong. We think we know some things about suicide and its impact on us, but what if the narrative that we have learned is wrong? Because the truth is this: in 2015, it was the first year the Journal of American Medical Association first came out with data to say that African American youth ages 5 to 12 were dying at a higher rate than white youth in the same age range. 3 years later in 2018, the same journal came out with data that said the rate of African American youth aged 5 to 12 dying by suicide was twice that of white kids in the same age range. So the notion that we're not impacted by suicide is wrong. And I heard it as I was growing up. I heard the story over and over. That ain't our problem. That ain't our issue. That's other people's issue. But I also want to tell you that here in America, we have recorded about 4,700 suicides of African Americans per year. Those are recorded suicides. Those are not the ones that go reported as something else. But 4,700 recorded suicides. And of those 4,700, almost 80% of those are black men. Now, we talk about the usual suspects. We talk about violence. We talk about drugs. We talk about high blood pressure. We talk about diabetes. But we need to add suicide to the list because we are also dying by suicide. We might as well take our heads up out of the sand and recognize it. It is an issue that's impacting our community. And currently, the rate of suicide for African American men is lower than that of white males. But I'm here to tell you the rate is increasing. And it's just a matter of time before the rate of suicide for African American men rivals that of white men, the same way that the amount of suicides for our youth has crept up. Now, we shouldn't really be surprised by this with our history, the things that we have endured. But we have to change the narrative. We got to start to change the narrative with our young people, because if we don't, we are implicit in the deaths of our young people. And now, social media, if we allow their friends, their peers to parent them and tell them who they are, they're going to get a false sense of who they are, and they're going to end up falling prey to some things that we don't pray to. And I know for young people, it is a very difficult world they have to navigate now. because they're getting every day on social media messages about what's good, what's bad, what's right, and what's wrong. We live in a world today where for our young people to obey their parents and live a traditional lifestyle, they're going to be called fools by their friends. If they want to be engaged in their faith-based community, their church, their mosque, they're going to be called nerds by their friends. If they want to do well in school and study and make good grades, they're going to be called outcasts. Our young people to understand there's a life beyond social media. There's a life beyond what your friends think. And we need to teach them to think about the future, because one of the things that happens to folks who consider suicide is they don't see the future, they only see the circumstances. We got to teach our young folks how to see the future. Help them to understand that 10, 15, 20 years down the road, when that same one that called you names has to take their child to the doctor, and you walk out the back with your white doctor's coat, they won't call you a fool, they'll call you doctor. 10, 15, 20 years from now, when they have to go to court because they got a speeding ticket or because they broke in or did something they had no business doing, and you're sitting up there behind the bench with the judge's robe on, they won't call you a nerd, they'll call you your honor. 10, 15. Now, when they go to apply for a job and you're sitting behind the desk and you make the decision about whether they get the job or not, they don't call you a fool, they don't call you a nerd, they call you ma'am, sir, whatever you tell them to call you, because they want that job. We got to teach them to look beyond. We got to teach young people that you don't have to like me, but you will respect me. My own personal motto is, I don't mind if you call me a dog as long as you call me a big dog. But it shouldn't be surprising to us the things that we have to endure. We have endured centuries of chattel slavery, followed by institutionalized racism and oppression. So is there any wonder that sometimes we do exhibit this multi-generational adaptive behavior? Some is going to be positive because it's going to be resilience. But others are going to be negative because of the impact of trauma. And make no mistake about it, trauma does impact us. We look at what's happening in our African American community. 17%, roughly 17% of the young people in this country are black youth. Our young people make up about 17% of the youth in this country. Yet, we make up 45% of the kids in the juvenile justice system. Something is wrong with that. And we have to change that narrative. As African American people, we make up roughly 12, 13% of the total population in this country. But we make up 40% of the homeless people in this country. Something's wrong with that. Something's wrong with that narrative. We know that in our jails and prisons today, there are over 400,000 men and women living with mental illness who are in jails and prisons. And that should resonate with us for a number of reasons. One, because the number one cause of preventable deaths in jails and prisons is suicide. So men and women are taking their lives in jails and prisons. And also because over 50% of those people in our jails and prisons in this country are black. That's an issue for us. And I do want to be clear. I do want to state that I know that other ethnic groups other than just black and brown people deserve attention too. So make no mistake, Asian and Hispanic Americans, they receive their fair share of racism too. However, I'm going to stick again to what I know, and that's the black experience in America. As African Americans, the negative stereotypes that we endure, the racism that we have experienced, have led many of us to PTSD. Whether you call that post-traumatic stress disorder or post-traumatic slave disorder, it has led to consequences for us. And there are findings from national studies that indicate that African Americans have a 9.1% prevalence rate for PTSD compared to 6.8 for whites. So that means that almost 1 in 10 black people becomes traumatized in their lifetime. Stats show that for African American males, 62% of African American males over the age of 18 have witnessed a traumatic event. 72% or have experienced a traumatic event. 72% have actually witnessed a traumatic event impacting someone else. And 59% say they know of a friend or family member that has experienced some type of trauma. Now, the other thing, too, we talked about the number of African Americans in prison. Statistics also show that for African American males who have been incarcerated, they are twice as likely to experience PTSD as someone who was not incarcerated. So what that also means is that when we are disproportionately putting black men in jails and prisons, then we discharge them and expect them to just pick up and go on, live life and be productive members of society without addressing the PTSD they experience from living in a hyper-vigilant state 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the duration of their incarceration. We have set them up to fail. And it's not just something that's impacting our African American men, but also our African American women. If you look at our brothers and sisters here in the Muslim faith, 60% of Muslim Americans report some level of religious discrimination, surpassing all other religious groups. Younger Muslims, women, and Arabs are most likely to experience prejudice based on their religion. Nearly 1/3 of Muslim Americans perceive discrimination in healthcare settings. And that hits home for me because I work in a healthcare setting. But experience discrimination in a healthcare setting either by being excluded or ignored. We have at our facility what we call Let's Talk sessions. And one of the first ones we did, we brought teammates into a room, what we call our auditorium. It's really just a big meeting room, but we brought people in there, put the chairs in a circle, and we had conversation about what's really going on, what's really impacting us and our ability to give care to the people that come into our doors. And one of the things that it hurt me to hear people in my facility say, but it was very true, was that an African American man who comes into our emergency department, and my brother here was a part of that conversation, so he knows this to be true, that African American man was much more likely to get an injection faster than anybody else because he's going to be perceived to be more dangerous. And if we think that way in a helping environment where I, as a black man, lead that facility and it happens in my facility, think about how much is happening in other places. And we might as well acknowledge it to be true. So let's get to this. What is the role of the faith-based community? Well, there's always been a connection to faith and emotional well-being for people of color. It was faith that sustained our ancestors through slavery because they sang and hummed spirituals as they worked and they toiled in the fields. There's always been an intersection of faith and freedom, whether it's freedom from physical bondage, spiritual bondage, or mental bondage. Faith has always been the key to unlocking the shackles. And for centuries, and I know this growing up in the church, anything that ails us, we've been told to pray it away. Just pray about it. Pray a little harder. Have a little bit more faith. And if it don't move today, it's going to move in the sweet by and by. But while we're trying to pray away mental illness, don't get me wrong. I know God's got all power and God can do all things. But I also know that God wants us to use the resources he's given us. And while we're trying to pray away mental illness, while we're trying to pray away depression, while we're trying to pray away anxiety, our young people are dying. While we're trying to pray away depression, our women are suffering from postpartum depression after giving birth. My mother gave birth to 5 children. I didn't know until I was an adult that she suffered from postpartum depression after each one of us. And she was told, just deal with it. At home, my grandmother came and sat with her, and she just had to endure and get over it. Because we were supposed to be strong and resilient. After all, we endured slavery. We can endure anything. That's the way she was told. That's the way that we were raised. Our men are having to live in the aftermath of trauma, and we keep right on singing and misquoting scripture. And I emphasize misquoting because I heard a whole lot of butcher scripture when I was growing up, but I wouldn't even get into that. During a given year, clergy, faith leaders see more people than psychologists and psychiatrists combined, making the church and its leadership a first choice for many individuals in times of personal distress. And African American faith leaders play a role in community messaging about what's important to black and brown people. So it is imperative that our faith leaders are well equipped to respond appropriately to the lack of resources in our communities and removing barriers to care. That needs to be a part of our conversation. That needs to be a part of what our churches are out front leading the charge for: access to care for our people living with mental illness. You know, I said I grew up in the church. My father pastored for 48 years, and I never once heard him talk about mental illness from the pulpit. Nor did I hear any of his colleagues talk about mental illness from the pulpit. You know, one of the things, too, about being a pastor in eastern North Carolina, and my father pastored, one time he pastored two churches at one time, a couple of times in his career he pastored two churches at one time. All rural churches, don't pay much money. And I thought we were rich because I'd see them, take up the offering on Sundays. First of all, I didn't realize that the big table with the most money was a building fund. That wasn't going to the preacher anyway. The other thing I didn't realize is that they were all ones in the house. A whole lot of money there. But one of the things that happened when you were the preacher was family stuff. So they were always giving us stuff. Always got hand-me-downs. We were glad to get them because we didn't have much. And they would always invite us over for dinner because, you couldn't pay the preacher much. You could at least give him the biggest piece of chicken, so you bring him over to the house for that. And so one time this lady gave some clothes, and in the clothes there was these two shiny pairs of boots, sharp boots, nice boots. There was a black pair and a brown pair. Brown pair fit my brother. The black pair happened to fit me. And I was glad to get, because back then you had one pair of shoes, you wore them all week, and then you shine them up on Sunday and wear them to church. So I was glad to get another pair of boots. And these boots were so sharp, I couldn't wait to wear them to school the next day. And these were the kind of boots that I took those boots, put them on, tucked my pants leg in those boots, laced them up just beneath my knee. I don't know if I looked more like a pirate or a prostitute, but I thought I was sharp with those boots on. I was sharp. Now, the thing I never factored into this equation, though, was that the lady who gave us the boots didn't have any sons. All she had was daughters. So I didn't know that I was still sharp. I didn't know that I had on a pair of girls' boots. But I'm here to tell you, every other child at Washington Street Elementary School knew I had on girls' boots. And they thought it was their patriotic duty to remind me that I had on girls' boots. But you know what? Like you said, as I think back on it, I was sharp. There's nothing wrong with those boots. Those boots looked good. Did they have what? Oh, they had the heels. I'm telling you. If I had them on now, I'm not even getting into that. But anyway, the boots were sharp. There was nothing wrong with them. They were comfortable. I decided that a 10-year-old wearing boots that were designed for a 10-year-old girl. And in a lot of ways, we treat people living with mental illness. Nothing wrong with them, but they're different. So we decide you don't fit the norm. You don't fit society. So we have news for you, so we're going to cast you aside. And we have got to get past that. Stigma around mental health is a significant barrier to accessing the needed support and care for individuals facing mental illness concerns. And if they can't come to the church, if they can't come to the place that they call family, where are they going to come to? If they've been able to stand there in hope that my big brother will show up, I don't know what. So many people in our community, they are hoping that of all places, of all people, my faith family will understand Yet what they often get is you just need to pray a little bit harder. You need to get closer to God. You need to just pull yourself up by your bootstrap. And as my sister alluded to, they may not have any boots. The assurance that mental health awareness is lifted up in our community has to begin with our church. It has to begin with our faith leaders, because the faith-based community has always been the gatekeeper to the African American community. So what can we do? First of all, realize that mental health conditions are medical conditions that are very common. It's likely that several families in this congregation are impacted by mental health in some way or another, which makes mental health significant to the church. Number two, the individuals and families that are seeking guidance deserve to have their needs addressed appropriately and from an accurately informed source. And as the Imam said earlier, sometimes you need to realize that you need to refer them to a mental health professional. Somebody comes in and they have a heart condition, and you know they're having a heart attack. You're going to call 911. You're going to pray for them, but you're going to call someone who has the expertise to treat them. Why would we treat mental illness any different? You know someone is clinically depressed, but instead of calling 911, we're just going to pray about it and hope you feel better. Faith communities should seek not to replace trained mental health professionals, but seek opportunities to collaborate and work together to achieve the optimal wellness for the individual and for the community. You know, we talk about integrated care. That's one of the big buzzwords now, integrated care. And integrated care, basically, the way most people define it, implies that we are incorporating the physical care and usually try to integrate is we try to integrate behavioral health into the primary care practice. So we want to go, you be able to go to your primary care doctor and they can deal with your needs, whatever they are, mental health, physical health, whichever, which is great. But I believe the next step is, how do we integrate healthcare into the churches? How much more would somebody like to be able to come to their church where they feel like they belong and they feel safe, and turn on the computer and be able to talk to your therapist in the comfort of your church? You feel like, I grew up here, I know these people care about me. I believe that's what we got to integrate. How do we integrate into the YMCA? How do we integrate into the church? How do we integrate into the community center? We got to recognize the potential for African American churches and mosques for providing depression education and treatment for African Americans. Within the African American community, and particularly in the rural communities like I grew up in, churches represent a key portal where as many as 85% of the community can be reached in those environments. And I would say also to the church, be more than just the venue. Be the convener. Don't wait for somebody to say, hey, can we host something at your place? Seek out to host some things at your place. When you're putting your calendar together, your yearly calendar, look to have some mental health events on your calendar as you're planning your social calendar. Everything ain't about a 7-layer cake or whatever you call those things. Sometimes we need to have something around mental health and provide education. Bring folks in that can talk about depression and the symptoms of depression, and find ways to increase support for those experiencing depressive symptoms. And I would say finally, too, to all of our brothers and sisters here, don't forget about the needs of your faith leaders. Don't forget about the needs of your clergy. We dump a lot on them. I saw my father, as I was growing up, had to get up in the middle of the night sometime and go pray for somebody, go to the hospital and visit somebody. There was a survey a few years back of 500 faith leaders, and of those 500 faith leaders, 16% indicated they feel like they're not equipped at all to minister to people with mental illness. 53% said they felt somewhat equipped. 30% said they felt at least competent. So you're first of all asking them to step into something that sometimes they don't have the expertise for, but give them at least the leeway to say, I don't know all the answers here, but I'm going to connect you with somebody who does. That doesn't mean that your pastor has failed you. That means your pastor has helped you. And also there was a 2016 survey among clergy that found that 11.1% of clergy experienced depression. 13.5% experienced anxiety. 7% experienced anxiety and depression. And 58% said they don't have any true friends. 52% said they felt like they could not meet their church's expectations. So as we are thinking about the needs of our community, let us also think about the needs of our leaders. Let's support them. Let's give them the care that they need in order to be able to care for their people. And I'm going to leave you with this. As I said, I grew up in Eastern North Carolina, and my father was a pastor. So I grew up with a very, very, very narrow way of looking at the world. Everything was black and white. When I was growing up, I was told, okay, if you drink alcohol, you're going to hell. You dance, you're going to hell. You think evil thoughts, you're probably going to hell. Couldn't play cards, better not roll dice, none of that kind of stuff. That's the way I was raised. And that's the world I knew. Oh, but then I went to college. Went to North Carolina Central University. And learned some things I didn't know. Met some folks I had never met before. But one of the things I did not learn was that I don't care how old you get, you ain't never grown to your mom and daddy. So after I graduated from college, I came back home for a little while. Driving back and forth to Wilson, North Carolina, figured I'd move back home, a little money, and but I'm grown now. I can kind of do it, go as I please. Then I can say nothing. I've been to college now because I'm a man. Not to my daddy. And my daddy had a habit of saying on a daily basis, you think you're a man, but you're not. You ain't grown till you live in your own house, pay your own bills, then you can come and go as you please. And I didn't hear it. So I was out hanging out with my friends, and I had been exposed to things in college that I had not to at home, and so I was out drinking with my friends and doing some things that are now legal in several states, but that. And I came like 2 o'clock. So come, my mom and dad, they go to bed 8:30. Well, this particular night, he had been out visiting the sick. So it's 2 o'clock in the morning. All I really have to do is get in the house, get past him, get in my room and get in the bed, and I'm home free. So I sneak in the house, hear him still in the shower, I sneak down the hall, I get into my room, I get in the bed, put the cover over my head, and I turn to the wall. And I hear him as he getting out of the shower, and I'm listening. So I hear him get out of the shower, hear him coming down the hall. All I got to do is hear him go past my door, and I'm good. He doesn't go past my door. He stops at my door. Asked me the one question I did not want to hear. You been drinking? I said, no, I ain't been drinking. He said, don't you lie to me. Now, when your daddy said, don't you lie to me, I was no longer high then. He said, don't you lie to me. He said, I can smell it. Then he said, let me tell you something. You think you're grown, but you're not. You're not a man till you live in your own house, pay your own bills, then you can come and go as you please, but you ain't going to do that in my house. And I said, okay, well, he got it out of his system, but he started again. Let me tell you something. I said, oh, my God, I can't hear this right now. But I knew in my mind, if I want him to stop talking, I'm going to have to turn over and face him. Just face the music. Get it over. Let him get it out of his system. So I turn over in the dark. And I said, I'm at least going to face him, let him get it out. And he starts on that thing again. I know you think you're grown, but you're not. Eyes adjusted to the dark. I realized that my daddy standing there lecturing me is butt naked. I heard him get out the shower. I didn't hear him putting the clothes on. He's butt naked, and he's in his house. And he starts lecturing me again, but because of all of a sudden the circumstances had changed, I heard it for the first time. It all of a sudden dawned on me, you think you're grown, but you're not. You're not a man till you live in your own house, pay your own bills, and then you can come and go as you please. And I share that with you because I may not have shared anything with you today that was new to you. I may not have shared anything with you today that you hadn't heard before. But whatever it takes, hear it this time. like you've never heard it before and make a change. Thank you.
Hello? Yeah. Thank you. That was a great story. Information, statistics. I learned a whole lot. I took a whole lot of notes. So thank you. We're going to move swiftly since we're behind on. We're going to introduce Miss Lakeisha Harris, and she's going to come and introduce the panel. If you have to use the restrooms, they are out that door to the left, I believe. And right. All right. So, Miss Lakeisha Harris seeks to enhance the world one family at a time. I probably don't need to read all of this because I know her personally, but she is a great therapist. She is a licensed mental health therapist, a parent coach, and author of her new book, Heal, Date, and Thrive, for all the single ladies out there. She is responsible for her personal demeanor and genuine care for a well-being of those who she works with naturally draws people in. She specializes in supporting individuals and families seeking to enhance their current situation and assist with putting pieces of their lives back together. So, Lakeisha has her degrees from criminal justice from UNC Charlotte and her master's in professional counseling from Liberty University. So we welcome Miss Lakeisha Harris.
Good afternoon. Good morning. I want to move swiftly because I am a big person on respecting people's time, and I want to get this awesome panel on here. Some questions. My role today is to create an atmosphere where everyone is leaving with new information and information that they can use. And I want to begin to bring up our panel. First, we have, and I didn't get the last name, Jabril. Mohammed. Welcome, Jabril Mohammed, to this panel. He is a data analyst specialist for Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department in the Crime Analysis Unit, as well as an adjunct instructor at Johnson C. Smith University. Next, we have O'Neill Walker. O'Neill is a school social worker at Coolwood STEM Academy with Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools and an agency social worker with Friends Incorporated. Next, we have Sheila Wright. Miss Sheila Wright. That means clap. Miss Sheila Wright is a registered nurse. She's with the health ministry. She's a health ministry coordinator for the Faith Community Health Ministry Department at Atrium Health. And they have huge bios, so please read them when you get a chance. Next, we have Lachey Avery. She has spent the last 18 years in the human service field. We have Dawn Lillard. Thank you. She is a registered nurse as well with 15 years of experience and works with North Carolina Adult Mental Health Specialty Team at Therapeutic Alternative Incorporated. And then last but not least, we have Warith Dean Muhammad. And he is currently a sergeant with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department Special Investigation Bureau. All right, so one of the things as well that I want to make sure everyone's engaged in participating. So if the panelists are saying something that you could, please nod, shake, raise your hand, involved, be engaged, okay? If there is something that you're a little confused, make a little confused face so I can get some more clarity for my panel, because my role today is to make sure that you are leaving here with some new information, that your questions are being answered. So of course I have a list of questions that were developed, but I really want us to begin get on a genuine process of really connecting faith, cultural diversity, and mental health, because it's way, way, way important. Does that make sense? So I know we have people at all different levels. Tend to make things real simple because I want us to leave here with some real practical things that we can do and get our life better, get us all on a healthy place. I think a lot of times we come into situations and the people who are in the circle, the people audience hears it so much, but I really want you to leave with doing it, but doing something as well. All right, so my first question, and we're gonna, because of time, we're gonna try to limit our comments down to 2 minutes. We're gonna try to get 2 to 3 people to answer a question, so we don't need every single person to answer every question, okay? So the first question is, when you think about mental health, how important are cultural differences as it relates to prevention, interventions, diagnosis, treatment, and or recovery? And I'm going to stand behind you, and if you want to answer the question, just raise your hand. Yeah. The question is, when you think about mental health, and if you don't raise your hand, I'm going to pick you. That's just what. How important is cultural differences as it relates to prevention? Thank you.
Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. In thinking about the question in terms of prevention, when we think about culture, you think about language, you think about the community that one is a part of, you think about folkways, mores, and that kind of stuff. So let's say, for instance, if you have someone who is part of a Muslim community, but they're from a different country, and they're here, and they really don't, from where they're from, they really don't have any discussion around mental health issues. It's taboo in that country. But when they come here, and let's say if they have a child that's in school, I'm just using an example, and the teacher notices that there's a problem with that particular student. But because of where they're from, because of their cultural experiences from elsewhere, there may be some blockage in terms of giving that information to that parent about their child. One, because of where they come from, because of the taboo. But then also we may have problems with language barriers in terms of the instructor being able to communicate with that parent about what's going on with their particular child. So let's say if that person's from Burmese, because we have the Burmese community here in Charlotte, and so we try to, in terms of the police department, we try to find people who can deal with this particular community. But because of language barriers, there may be some problems in terms of prevention, in terms of preventing them from being victims of crime. But also may be problems with, in terms of helping them with mental health issues that they may have. So when we look at maybe persons that come from different cultures or different religious backgrounds, we have to make sure that, one, that we can find people that can speak the same language as them to be able to help them overcome any issues that they may have.
Awesome. Thank you, Jabril. All right. Actually, I'm going to switch that question. I want to ask the question, through you, your experience, do you believe cultural biases, whether real or perceived, do you believe that they affect individuals wanting to get help?
I definitely agree. speak from my experience and working in the school system. The cultural biases and the way that a lot of families perceive getting help and what that means prevents a lot of kids from being able to comfortably come and speak. And so I would most likely see kids walking around school looking sad, looking very disoriented. And when I pull them aside and try to speak to them, a lot of times I hear kids say that I really want to tell you, but my mom will probably kill me. And so to me, that's very disheartening and challenging to actually help a person that you see struggling. And a lot of times, I don't think parents realize as a school social worker, you know, we don't necessarily treat. We don't treat kids in the school system. We assess, we process with them, we find out what's going on. A lot of times we are going to share that information with you as a parent if it doesn't break, the confidentiality and trust of that student. But we are going to also make a referral out for services. And then with that, making that referral, that gives you an opportunity to have discussion with your child. And I think a lot of times parents struggle because they say, well, my son, my daughter didn't tell me this, so why would they tell you? A lot of times we don't know why kids aren't comfortable talking to their parents, but it is a reality, especially when you're talking about sexual abuse. A lot of times some of the sexual predators are very close people to the family. And so if that person says, you know what, if you ever tell somebody, tell your mom, I'm going to hurt her. Well, imagine that weight on a child that I'm being violated, I'm being abused. But if I tell, I'm going to lose probably the person that means the world to me. I have a quick question. I'm going to pass it back on to you. But how many of you all have car insurance? I hope everybody in here who has a car. When was the last time you've been in a car accident? But you still have car insurance, right? I look at having access to a mental health professional such as that. We never know when we're going to need them, but we need to have them and have a relationship with them to where we feel comfortable that when we are dealing with something, we know that we can go to somebody that we trust, that we know, and that knows us, and that there is no that connection to where I feel like it is going to put that person in harm or jeopardy. So.
All right. I see the. Do you want to enter?
I sometimes look at cultural biases, me being a female and in the healthcare system. Let's look at the physical aspect. If I'm looking for a primary care provider, how many of you as women prefer to deal with a female provider? Men, would you prefer to deal with a male provider? Because you can better relate to that particular person. So when we're looking at cultural biases, if we take that same concept in reference to our physical, because that person can better relate to me as a woman, me or you as a man, we have to look at that same type of bias when it comes to mental illness. There's that wall that's there. So if I can't trust you or I don't feel comfortable with you, I'm more than likely not going to come to you about my particular issue. So there is that cultural bias when we're dealing with mental health, and we shouldn't make it a distinction between physical and mental. It's the same thing. It's an illness, whether it's dealing with this body, but at last I remember, my head is a part of my body. My mind is a part of my body. So there are those cultural biases, and it does have an impact on how we relate to the illness in general. Even when it comes to just treatment and prevention, there's that genetic makeup of African Americans and and whites. So we still have to look at the fact that how I respond to something is not going to be the same as my white counterpart. And so there's that cultural bias that they need to, or people that we're dealing with in the medical profession still need to understand, as Victor alluded to, because that's going to have an impact on how you treat me. It's going to have an impact on how, if I get the right treatment, or helping me in prevention. So
Thank you. And so that brings me to a question. So, see, we are all here for the main purpose, and we all understand the importance of faith and mental health, correct? And so, I would like to know from each of you, actually, from your individual expertise, what do you think is something that you in your organizations, as well as people in the community, can do to, one, bring awareness about mental health and normalize the treatment of it? What do you think you and your organization can do, or those in those areas? So whether it be the police, whether it be health, whether it be social work, whatever area that your expertise is, what do you think would be a great approach that will normalize the treatment, the diagnosis of mental health?
I think what we're doing today is to start having the conversations, bringing awareness. As a law enforcement person, what we see a lot of times is getting access to the programs and the resources. So just to give an analogy, if I was 4 feet tall and I had the option of building a house, I would build it with resources and facilities that were conducive of my height and my challenges where I can be successful. So now if I invited all of you into my house, you will have some challenges. But that house was built primarily for have to be successful. So to be able to address a lot of the mental health concerns, the biases, some of the things that we're seeing in law enforcement, we have to collectively come together, have these discussions, and be able to bring the resources out into the community, whether we're using the mosques, the churches, the nonprofits, to bring awareness and to bring the resources. I'll leave you one other scenario. We had a family that moved from Turkey, husband and wife, 3 children. 3 children dealing battle with autism. When she came here, they didn't have housing, so they went to one of your extended stays. We found out about them through 911 calls because of the children having certain challenges. And that started the whole process of getting them help. But prior to that, the family was very apprehensive because social media basically painted a picture that their faith, their culture was not accepted. So they were very hesitant about making phone calls and how they would be perceived, as well as the language barrier. So again, we have to get out in the communities. We have to do more. Instead of one of these per year or one per month, 2 or 3 a month. And we can support each other by going to each other's faith places of worship and supporting each other to make this challenge much more conducive. Thank you.
I'm Dawn, and I am with the Geriatric Adult Mental Health Specialty Team. So I'd like to ask you to think about a different cultural bias right now. We've been talking about religion and race as cultures, but age. Older adults represent an age, a culture as well. And how are we treating those folks? There is a thing called ageism. And many of us may not be thinking a lot about it, but we should, because there's a lot of baby boomers, I think, in this room. And we are quickly aging, folks, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. But 7 baby boomers are turning 65 every minute of the day. So we're coming. We don't put a whole lot of value on seniors at times, and sometimes it surprises people. Victor was talking a lot about suicide numbers and rates, but you may be surprised to hear that the suicide rate in elderly men is higher than any other age group in the United States, including young people, and that surprises many people. Many people think that depression is a normal part of aging, but it is not. It is underdiagnosed, undertreated, underrecognized, and we need to do something about that. I think sometimes our faith-based communities don't always know what to do with a senior who's expressing loneliness and depression. And what I'm here to say is my program has some education that we can offer to the faith-based communities. I think it does start with the leaders, however, to embrace that and to reach out to us. we're more than glad to work with any faith-based organization in providing some education about not only depression but Alzheimer's disease, which is another fast-growing issue in our country. So I just encourage you to embrace the idea of education and awareness about mental health in older adults and seek to grow your knowledge levels.
Again, good afternoon. My name is Lachey Avery. I am with Cardinal Innovations, and I am the Community Engagement Manager. My team is responsible for training and education of behavioral health topics, those being mental health, substance use and addiction, and intellectual and developmental disabilities. So when you ask the question, what can we do? We're doing it, but I need your help. So if you all could invite us into your organizations, into your community, I have a team of 7 that are more than willing and able to come into your places of worship, come into your community and educate your community or our community on how do we recognize the signs and symptoms of mental health disorders and substance use and addiction disorders that are often linked, and how can we make the referrals that need to be made for those of individuals, and how can we destigmatize mental health disorders so that people are willing to get the help that they need. So again, we are available. It doesn't matter if it's evenings, weekends. We want to be a resource to our community, but we need your help in getting into those communities. You can take down this number to request training. I'll give you my direct line as well as our 1-800 number. That number is 704-305-3474. Call me and we'll schedule a training. Our 1-800 number that we would love and need your help in getting this number out into the community as well, where folks can get access to the resources that they need, is 1-800-939-5911.
Awesome.
1-800-939-5911.
Okay, my name is Sheila, as you see, and I work for Atrium Health as the Health Ministry Coordinator for Faith Community Health Ministry Department. My role is to go out and form partnerships with faith communities to help them establish health ministry, looking at the whole person, mind, body, and spirit. And so when we talk about how can I help you, is to you be a part of our program. One of the things that we do is bring resources, connecting with Cardinal, connecting with this person. I'm the middle person that you don't have to call this person, that person. You can call me and I can connect and help you to coordinate if you have that person within your faith community. The other thing is that I'm a mental health first aid instructor. That is a program where you will learn how to, if someone is in a crisis, how do I help this person to get them to the right resources? The same way we do CPR, it is first aid around mental health. And a lot of times I think people need to be knocking down our doors to get this program. We offer this program. It is free. It is 8 hours long. And you say, oh, 8 hours is too much. But 8 hours is nothing compared to the statistics that we're listening to. And so if you're wanting to have a training in that, the first people that need to be online is the leadership in each of the faith communities, whether it's a mosque, whether it's a temple, whether it's a church. The leaders need to be on board, learning how, because you are the gatekeepers, how do I help and know and recognize the signs that this person is depressed, this person is anxious, this person is having a psychotic episode. What do I need to do to get you to the right resources? I think as faith community, particularly in the church environment, we a lot of times throw around a lot of jargon. I'm too blessed to be stressed. But I know, with me being Christian in the Bible, it didn't say anything that we would not be stressed. When you're not too blessed, well, you're not going to have any type of stress. And so we throw out these religious jargons all the time, and we're only fooling ourselves. So, yes, I am stressed, but how do I deal with that stress? How do we as faith take our faith and relate it to the health issues that we are dealing with to make it real? And so that's what my role is. If you want it, I have brochures out there. If you want to be a part of our program, just connect with me.
So if you're not talking, turn your mic off so the next person can talk.
I would say from a school standpoint, as far as getting that information out, and it will be to put on more events at the school, and that's something that I plan on working with my school about, is having nights where parents can come in and we actually talk about what mental health looks like. A lot of times parents, you send your kids to school, we got to realize we raise our kids to be a certain type of way. Like Mr. Armstrong was saying, he was raised one way, went to college, learned some different things. A lot of our kids are doing the same thing in middle school, and they come to school, they pick up different habits, they pick up different things. A lot of them can pick up depressive habit, and depression, and maybe drugs or whatever it is. So for a parent, when you see your kid come home and do something that's not normal, or it's something that you haven't really expose them to or anything of that nature, we got to go back to the source, and we got to figure out, what am I seeing? What is in the community? What mental health professionals are in my community? How can I get to meet them? What are the criteria in order to get help from a mental health professional? A lot of times, sometimes we think that we don't have the means to do it. If you have insurance, Medicaid, whatever the situation is, you have the means, and sometimes you don't need that. Some mental health professionals do sliding scales and things of that nature too, that I think a lot of people in the community don't know. So I think education is really key, and if you don't have a school social worker in your child's school, go to the school. Ask, why don't we have a school social worker? And if you do have a school social worker, get to know that school social worker. They're not there to make DSS reports and have your kids taken away. They're actually there to help those kids on a day-to-day basis, and not just the kids, but I pride myself on helping the family as well. So.
Here at the mosque, we've had some events to where we invited professionals from the mental health field to come out and do presentations, which was good. I'm going to speak on serving as a college instructor at John C. Smith University. I come into contact with students who have disabilities in terms of mental health issues and that kind of stuff. And one thing that I find that with some of the students I've had in the past is that they won't take advantage of the services on campus, because they don't want to be viewed as different from their peers. For instance, if a student has a disability of some sort, one of the benefits of going through the student disabilities office is for them to get extra time on taking a test or extra time on preparing a paper. And sometimes the students don't want to take advantage of those services because of the stigma. And the thing is, they have to realize is that you and I are the only ones who know your situation. I don't know what you're. But if you have college students, if you know of any college students that may have some type of disability, please encourage them to contact the Student Disabilities Office to where they can get that assistance on campus, because we want our students to be successful. And I know right now, I have one student right now. She'll start the course off strong, and then eventually she'll just fall off I won't hear from her. Every course that I've had with this particular student, it's like she'll start off strong and then she'll just disappear. So I know with her not taking advantage of those services, but also she's an online student. So that's another arena that we have to deal with as well. How do we help online students who have disabilities get the services they need as well?
All right, awesome, thank you. And so I hope that you guys have grasped this, because even as I'm standing here and being able to hear the perspective from law enforcement agencies, from those who work with the elderly care, for those who work in the community, and being able to bring resources to you. These are all things that are very important. Really looking at health and the disparities and how health impacts our mental health, our physical health, and knowing that there are agencies out there that provide this stuff for free. Right, so we have to remove the excuses. I love that we are looking at our students, our parents, and so hopefully there is someone up here that you can relate to, that you can see as a resource, whether it's a college student, a kid, a parent, an elder, a person involved in law enforcement or the criminal justice system. We have to begin to have the conversations. So bringing awareness, and really, I encourage everyone when you leave here today to talk about what you experienced today from a different perspective to at least 3 people, right? Because number one, we have to remove the stigma. No one's getting help. We all know that help is needed, right? But people are not getting the help because of the stigmas. And so bringing this awareness and having those conversations. I know I'm trying to find out how much more time we have, because I know it's 11:14. All right, so we have 15 more minutes, and I appreciate everyone here. I hate that we didn't get through more questions, but I do know we have a couple of the speakers. But again, I appreciate each person here on the panel. I hope you each have grasped something from a different perspective. I know I have in private practice, so I am kind of solo in my own world. So I think it's great to see law enforcement, elder care, nurses, health, college, as well as Cardinal Innovations, all these different environments that you guys now have a plug into. Y'all got that? Y'all have a plug into. So there's resources outside, and the key thing is do something with the information that you have. We've had great speakers, we had great information, and I know we're about to close, and I'm not your closer, but I think it's very important to take an action step, right? We all know information. It's the action that makes the difference. So what's your action going to be? What are you going to do different? While they're preparing to come up here to do the next? Really don't? Okay. All right. Y'all already know who it is. Thank y'all. Wait, I have one.
CPD is doing this thing called, it's an ongoing training, and they want all the officers to go through it. It's basically called crisis intervention training, a CIT officer. So if there's any family that is in need, or there's a crisis that's going on, you actually can call 911 and request a CIT officer to respond. And that's an ongoing thing. They want to train all the officers to do that. And what that looks like is, in the past, if we went to a call for service, say someone was going through a challenge and they thought someone was breaking into their house. Once we determined that it wasn't a criminal matter, we would close that out. Now, once we see some signs, we then bring in the health care professionals to take it a step further. So that's something that we continue to work on. So, thank you.
Thank you. Can we get a round of applause from our panel? Can we get a round of applause for Jarrell, O'Neill, Ella, Lachelle, Miss Dawn, and my Warith, and Lakeisha.
Thank you, panel. Thank you. First, before you all leave, I want to remind you that there are surveys that we would love for you to fill out, and forgot to let you know that there are hashtags if you are on social media. I know we're in a room of young people who are on social media. But the hashtag is CLT Faith Mental Health, and then CLT Minority Mental Health. They're on the bottom of the survey. Now we will have the Honorable Carla Cunningham, who represents 106th District in the North Carolina House of Representatives. She is here and going to speak to us. She's worked with hospice nurse while fulfilling her appointment at the North Carolina Commission for Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, Substance Abuse Services, and such a great advocate, active advocate in our community.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's almost afternoon, and I wouldn't have missed this for the world. I was in Raleigh yesterday, and of course we're fighting about the budget. And I'm going to tell you some of my remarks that I stated on the floor. But I almost didn't make it, but Joan told me, said, text me, call me. And so I didn't even go pick up my bags from the house. I have a little apartment up there that I share with the roommate. And I said, I got to get there because this is what I'm passionate about and this is what I live for every day, to get up and go to the General Assembly and stand up and fight for. And some people say, why are you passionate about it, Carla? Because it's up close, personal. I've had to struggle and I know the experience. Because I've been involved with the mental health system since my son was 13 years old. He's 36 now. By God and grace, he's 36 now. And I've lived that journey with him. So I can go stand up for the less recognized individuals in our community, the ones that are left by the wayside and dismissed often by our North Carolina state budget. I learned the other day that the Department of Health and Human Services budget was going to be cut by $42 million. $42 million. Then they want to move the complex out of Raleigh to a small town called Granville. And that would take about 5 years. So when I got on the floor and started to make my remarks, some people try to soothe people's egos, and I'm not like that. I'm going to keep it real, and I'm going to say what's real, and I'm going to move on. And so the first thing that came out of my mouth yesterday is, you all in here, my colleagues, you act like it's not a mental health crisis in the state of North Carolina. You also act like it's not an opioid epidemic in North Carolina. And I'm sure they didn't expect me to say that because they believe they have done right in that budget. But they know they haven't. But they just need somebody to stay on top of their neck and put that foot down and keep on twisting it and reminding them, you done left these people behind for almost 30 years. We have innovation waiver slots for intellectual or developmental disability individuals, and they can live to be adults. They may have it when they're children, but they can live to be adults. We have 12,000 slots that are filled right now. They're going to increase it by maybe 500. But we got about 13,000 individuals in North Carolina waiting on a space. And these are children, some of them are adults that are developmentally. They can't operate. They can't function, possibly do their assisted daily living needs without assistance. And they may also have dual diagnosis, which is mental health and another component going on. Then you also have senior citizens, which the lady from geriatrics, she spoke about. In 20 years, most of the population in the state of North Carolina will be over the age of 60, going on 65, and most of that's in rural counties. We're not dealing with dementia. We're not dealing with depression in that population. Right now in our state, we have nursing facilities that's supposed to have ombudsmen. We've been down for 12 for the last 4 years. And what those do is when you put someone in a skilled nursing facility, it's a sign on the wall. They tell you you can call this number if you see something going wrong in that facility. And we just been down. We haven't filled the position because we don't want to pay people to do that. The state don't want to pay people, cutting your benefits and everything. So it's a challenge. And I'm traumatized, believe it. I'm traumatized because I go up there dealing with them. and it's not always a pleasant environment to be in. But I've learned how to deal with it through meditation and also advocating. Because part of your growth is giving back. I've received a lot. Believe it, I've received a lot. My son works a job. Some children, some adults never get to that point where they can work a job. So I've received some blessings, so I try to return. But the reason I'm telling you all of this about the budget, It's because we've been fighting for Medicaid expansion for 7 years in North Carolina. For 7 years. That would help 500,000 people that's in the gap, that don't have access to health care services or accessibility. That would take care of 185,000 people with developmental disabilities and mental health issues that currently do not get services. That would also take care of 85,000 people that has a substance abuse issue and can get services, whether it be opioid, alcohol, or heroin or anything else. That's 85,000 people. 24,000 veteran spouses, children. They served our country, but they don't qualify. They may have came back earlier, and they don't get services. So yes, I'm a big advocate for Medicaid expansion. So I'm asking you all, within the next few weeks, yesterday I was up there and I was holding the line on the votes. Because I want it. Because I know what my son had to go through. I know what I had to go through with him. And I know there's other people out there, parents, family members that's going through it too. They don't know where to go. They don't know what to do. They don't know who to call to get those services. I'm just a lucky one. I'm just lucky. But that Medicaid expansion will help so many people. So we held the line. The governor, I promise you, is going to veto that budget. The number one priority in North Carolina right now is Medicaid expansion. It would help us a lot. Single women, single parent homes, and some children still in the gap. But yes, that's the number one priority. So if you saw it on the news, yeah, I'm fighting for Medicaid expansion. And I'm not going to stop. Because we're leaving too many vulnerable people behind. Lastly, what I say is I'm grateful for all the people that came here this morning to be in this room. These are not easy conversations. Because it wasn't easy for me. I was embarrassed when I used to go in. I didn't want to tell folks what was going on in my house. But it got to a point where I ain't had no choice. And when it get there, you're going to move. You're going to move. You're going to do something. But I had to get over that. And I'm not afraid to tell people in the community, yes, I've struggled with my son. He still struggles now. But there's so many other people out there that's invisible. And we are required to do good by those people. Lastly, I made the statement, and I hope that when you all leave here, it's a school bond also. It's a school package bond that the governor wants. But I'll say this, and I told him this the other day. You can't breathe, you can't read. Because I believe in a whole-centered person. You got to have your mind well and your body well in order to function at the highest level that you're supposed to in this society, in order to be in a position to bless someone else and give something back. So if you can't breathe, you can't read. And when we start looking at the poverty in this state, 1.6 million people in the state of North Carolina live in poverty. Yes. You look over in the Crescent, the poverty of Crescent in Mecklenburg County, last in the country, upward mobility. We got to fight. So I'm going to ask you this in the next couple of weeks. I want y'all to pick up the phone. I want you to call the governor's office. I want you to call your elected officials. Not locally, you need to call your state, your senator, your House of Representatives. I'm it for this area. There's a couple more of us. Call all of them. Tell them to stand on Medicaid expansion for that 500,000 people. If we don't stand now, guess what? It's over. It is over. We are in the midst of a major shift of what we can see for the future of North Carolina right now. And so I'm serious. I'm going to give you the number. I'm not going to try to call you back and ask you. And you probably don't want me to. But the number to the governor's office is 919-814-2000. You tell them stay strong. You can call my office and tell me too. I need to hear it too. We all need to hear that we on the blank of change for medical services and mental health behavior services in the state of North Carolina with the expansion of Medicaid. And lastly, one last additional thing I hope that you all will take. We're going to be doing, I think next month, Victor will be at Friendship. July we'll be at Friendship for NAMI, doing some more stuff. And then August I'll be working with Cardinal Innovation to do a big initiative for the people of color, African Americans focused program with them, which will be huge. But I want y'all to talk to everybody. Get on your phones. You like to talk on the phone. I know I do when I get a chance. Don't text. Make it a personal, up-close conversation because somebody in your family is being impacted. Somebody. You just may not know it right away, but somebody is being impacted. So Reverend Shipman, Iman Khalil, a lot of y'all, we've been doing, this is 4 years, I believe, we've been doing mental health in the community. And they have certainly been much a part of it with the faith-based community. And we're going to keep doing it. And one thing I have said to people, I want to see somebody look like me. I want to see somebody that can lead me, that looks like me. And so I definitely have found that. We've been able to bring people in. And one last thing is, we don't want to always go out of our community. We like for people to come to us where we're comfortable, and it should be that way. So if anybody in here, when you go back and you talk to your people, tell them, hey, they said come into our communities where we live and talk to us. We shouldn't have to go to Park Road or somewhere else. Respect us and respect our values and come to us. I thank you, and I look forward as we move forward to the future, but dial those phone numbers. Dial those phone numbers so we can change North Carolina. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Cunningham. That was some great information. I'm blown away, as always. We will have our closing remarks by Lawrence Barker Bay. He is the Director and President of Living Waters and one of the main reasons why we are here today. So he founded Living Waters, and now we would like to hear from you, Mr. Lawrence.
First and foremost, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming today in support of this effort. I want to thank Representative Cunningham, Victor, Reverend Chipman, our host today. And they have done such a beautiful job in serving us. The women of Islam has really showed themselves out today and how they prepared us and nourished us today. And I want to thank each and every one that came from whatever organization you're in part of. Let's get engaged and collaborate with each other. At Faith Ministries, we have a job. We're mandated by God to do it. And we should step up to the plate and take our rightful place in ministering to God's people. And we just thank you again for all your hospitality that you have shown here at the mosque. You did such an incredible job in providing for us this morning, and we want to thank you. Let's give them a hand. They did such a wonderful job. And we're elated. So I want to thank our hosts and our people of color, and also our guests that came. Let's circulate and fellowship with each other before we leave here today. Exchange cards and fellowship with each other. I want to thank you again from Living Waters, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much. He's gonna do it? Okay.
Just one more thing. I told Reverend Shipman when he came in, I said, I'm going to get you back.
Yeah, right.
Last time we were at his place, he called me up for the closing prayer. So we're going to do the same. We're going to return that favor. Please.
You're kind, sir. Would you join hands with someone beside you? Amen. Let us bow our heads. In the language of Muhammad, we say, Bismillah ikraman ikrahim, wahdakula sharika lehu. The language of Abraham, we say, Barukata Yahweh Eloheinu melech ha'olam. Blessed be the name of the Most High God. You are the sovereign King and ruler of the universe. And for this privilege to be able to fellowship on such a critical issue that is in our community, we say thank you. Now, Father, we ask that you would nurture every seed of information that has been placed in our hearts and our minds, that we go forth into the remainder of this Friday knowing that we must become action-oriented, that we may do something with what we have heard. Thank you for the hospitality and the privilege of this masjid and this iman and all that we have experienced this day. We go forth now knowing that God is for us. In the name of Yahshua, the Messiah, we do ask this prayer. We said together, Amen.
Brother Shelton over in the corner, he informed me that he has some books and material for sale. Please go see Shelton. Hold your hand up. Brother Shelton, right in that corner.
Testing. Excuse me, folks. We're gonna get ready for our afternoon prayer so we can socialize out in the foyer while we clean this area up. Thank you very much.